Good morning, guys. I wanted to talk, hopefully briefly, about communication in relationships, which I know is a pretty cliche thing, but it's cliche for a reason. Like, it is a hugely important aspect of relationships, and I think a lot of people will give you communication as an answer to what's the secret for a long, successful marriage or relationship, but they don't really go into the specifics of that, how it works, or good and bad ways to communicate. And I think a lot of people interpret the communication as when something is wrong or upsetting you, to tell them so that they can fix it. And while that is an important part of a relationship, for sure, you should be able to air your grievances, have the other person hear and receive it, and then kind of both work towards a resolution to the problem. Absolutely. But I think that there's a huge missing element of communicating the positive aspects of things, communicating the positive aspects of your spouse too, or their positive traits. And a lot of people only communicate the negative. And it's so important, especially when you are tied to a person through marriage or an understanding, like you're just in a serious relationship with another person. That's a huge responsibility. Like, you are their person that they can come to be bolstered, to be like lifted up and encouraged, and have their self-esteem renewed. And like, you're the one person that has that inside, link to them, to be able to really, I don't know, you can really do a lot for them. And it can be a lot of good or a lot of bad, depending on how you approach it. And I think it's, especially in this day and age, when low self-esteem, low self-confidence and worth and stuff like that is such a epidemic, that almost every single person suffers from low self-esteem or worth or confidence from one degree to another. Almost every single person in some area of their life struggles with that. And so being their person, and seeing them at their, well, literally their most naked self, but being able to see sides of them that most other people can't see, and they're closest to their true self. There's boys running outside. Yeah. Anyway, you have a really amazing position in that person's life to really lift them up. So, and for some reason, like especially like sitcoms and stuff like that, make it seem like it's more acceptable, and I've seen it in real life plenty, that it's more acceptable to talk shit or complain about your spouse, and it's funny, and to kind of trash talk your spouse or your significant other. And it's like, why? What? And not only are you putting that out there, like you're putting it out into the air, that your spouse, oh, well, he can't handle this, blah, 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 or he can't, I don't know. There's so many things that I've heard that people just trash talk each other, and it's heartbreaking. If you can't love and respect your spouse, like, I don't understand why you're with them, really, in the first place. But I don't know how that works for other people. But there's so many thoughts on this. I'm trying to keep it together. I should have wrote it down so I didn't float. But like, my husband Aaron gets a lot of really strange compliments, and I don't care. If it's a really deep thing, but it's kind of off the wall. Like, I can't think of any right now, but I'll say it in a goofy way, and that's fine, because at least I've said it. It's out in the ether. The vibration has left, and he's received it and heard it. And hearing it yourself even helps you to not take your spouse for granted. By, my husband will make me coffee in the morning, and he makes better coffee than I do somehow. I think it's magic. It might be in the beard. I don't know, but he makes really good coffee. So he will make me a cup of coffee before he starts his workday, and that's really kind of awesome. Not kind of, it's really super awesome. He doesn't need to do that. He doesn't need to take time out of his morning to make me coffee, but he does, and it's wonderful, and I thank him every day. And I don't, like, every time he hands me a cup, I'm like, thank you for making me coffee. And don't take them for granted. Ugh. But yeah, and telling him, I've told him once. I'm like, it's really awesome. I really appreciate the fact that you do this. Like I truly do. It's not lost on me that you're taking time out of your morning to make me a cup of coffee. And it's really wonderful. Tell him stuff like that. Like vulnerability is such a huge aspect to intimate relationships. And it's such a taboo thing almost. Like you're not allowed to tell people how you feel about them. And how are they going to know? Like, that's the bottom line. If you don't tell them how you feel, then they can only guess. And again, with this day and age being so chronically low self-esteem, that sentence doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. They're going to most likely think the worst. So unless you correct them by telling them the best, they can only guess. But yeah, vulnerability is so frowned upon and is so like, oh my gosh, you don't want to seem clingy and needy. Don't be clingy and needy. That's a different thing, but letting them know, like if you're already in an intimate relationship with them, if you're already married or been in a relationship a long time, like feel it out. Don't like just meet them and go on a date and be like, I just think you're the most amazing human being on the planet and I'm so glad that I get to wake up with you every morning. That would be weird, especially if you don't even live together. Anyways, feel out the situation. But again, if you're married, like you're in it. They can't escape. They can, but let them know. Be like, dude, I am so honored and so lucky and so blessed to have you as my spouse. I know that sounds super cheesy, but I just am. And I am thankful like every day and think about how much I love you every day. We send that shit to each other in texts all the time. We've been married for 13 years. Vulnerability is a huge thing for relationships and communicating that vulnerability. Yeah, so communicating the good and communicating to your spouse, of course, but also about your spouse. Again, going back to the trash talking and stuff like that is just, I don't understand it, but everybody seems to do it. And if you're not, like, you're in their corner. You are their person. You are the one in their corner to, you know, say the best about them. You know the ins and outs of them. You shouldn't be airing their dirty laundry, or they're like, wow, yeah, well, he's got this issue and blah, 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 and he can't do this and that. It's bullshit. So, like, one of the issues that, as I say that, I'm going to tell you, I did talk to him about sharing this before so that he's okay with it. But one of the issues that we've had for a long time is that I'm a very adventurous person. Like, anything that life has to offer, I want to try it. Not like an adrenaline junkie. I don't need to jump out of planes to feel alive. But other things, like I want to travel and experience things and stuff like that. And he's a very, like, home-based person. And very much, you know, he was raised very, like, Catholic, leave it to Beaver. You know, you get married, you have a family, you go to work until you die. And that was his life's plan. Like, that's what he thought the option was. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not gonna... I think you married the wrong person if that was your plan, because I can't do that. And so there would be these fights, and he refuses to fight with me, which is a whole other thing. But I would get really upset by it. I'm like, I want to do all of this stuff, and you don't want to do anything. You never want to do anything, and blah, 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 blah. And I would get really annoyed by it and really angry by it and felt very stifled and hopeless. And I remember I was part of this study group, and I was venting about it once. And I don't normally do that. I think it's important to keep your fights and your spats to yourself or a close friend or something like that, but not just to spread shit anyways, but I was close to this group, the study group, and I was just really frustrated one night, and I'm just like, I don't know, he just never wants to do anything. I want to do all this stuff, and it's like dragging a dead weight with me everywhere I go. And they're like, well, okay, but like, listen to how you're talking about him. And this was right after we learned about manifesting and the power of intention and the power of your words and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I'm a big jerk. And so I didn't even say anything to my husband. I just changed the way that my internal dialogue about him. Like, instead of like, oh, he never wants to do anything. Because by me saying that at him constantly, And only having this one narrative for him was kind of locking him in this box of not wanting to do anything Aaron. That was his identity, at least even to me, which is, you know, as a spouse, is an important opinion. And I kind of locked him in there, and it didn't really give him the option to change or to grow, because that was his identity, that was his label. And so I shifted the way that I talked about him even to myself. Like when I would feel those feelings starting to come back in, I'd be like, no, my husband is worldly and adventurous and likes to travel and explore. And yeah, I did it in a kind of a bratty way. That's how I do things. Just kind of over the top, but it was in there. It changed the narrative, because as I was saying that, at least I wasn't saying the negative. And so probably 2 weeks after doing that, we were riding in the car, and he's like, are there any historical towns in Michigan other than Mackinac? And I was like, probably. It's an old state. Why? And he's like, oh, I just thought it would be cool to go on a road trip and visit them. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. Like, who are you? And that was 2 weeks into it. And now we're like a year and a half later, and we're working on like buying a van and getting out of debt so that we can live in a van and travel the United States. And it's his idea. What? So communicating to your spouse about your spouse, it has a huge impact on your relationship and your spouse's life in general. Like, speaking that life about them gives them the, like, it's just good stuff. Love them. Speak the good about them. Because, again, they're going to be hearing these good things about them, like, oh, they really actually appreciated that. I really like how that felt for me to get, you know, recognition, at least, for the stuff that I've done, and knowing that they're doing good things in the relationship, and that it's not being taken for granted, will encourage them and motivate them to do even more things like that. And it's just a huge, it can make a huge difference, changing the narrative. Your communications about the good things. Like, again, absolutely, when there's an issue, bring it up and talk about it in a respectful way. Not to pick a fight, not to take out your bad day on them because they left their sock on the floor, but to find a resolution to the thing. But communicate the good. Tell them how you feel about them, because they can only guess. Like, if you're looking at them and you just think that they're so beautiful, how the sun like hits their eyes and lights up their irises. I told Aaron that like 15 minutes ago when I dropped off a drink for him at work. I was like, oh, your eyes are so pretty when the sun shines through your irises. And he bats his eyelashes, and like, it's silly stuff, but it's love. It's verbal love. So don't forget those parts, as well as when you get to tell them what's wrong. So be nice, be loving. When there's an issue, don't like just jump down their throat. I usually take a step back and be like, well, is it really them? Is it something that I'm doing? Am I having a bad day? Yes, I even check my hormone levels. Be like, well, is it really that big of a deal, or is it just me? Or is there something in my past that's kind of being brought up by whatever he did, and he has no idea what's going on? So, check those things before you jump down someone's throat. And there was one other thing. It's already long enough. See you later. Be nice.